ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see.
Welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This week, we are talking Mike Flanagan's new Netflix TV series, The Midnight Club.
Hey, but before we talk Midnight Club, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, it'd be a great favor to us. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as that little bell next to it, so you never, ever miss a video. And hey, while you're there, go ahead and like the video. It'd be fantastic. Also, as a reminder, Deep Dive Movie Reviews contain spoilers, so you have been warned. James, let's talk The Midnight Club.
Okay, so yes, The Midnight Club, 10-part TV adaptation for Netflix from the 1990s Christopher Pike novel of the same name, which I think it's fair to say can be classed as a YA novel or young adult novel. So it's slightly different material territory for Mike Flanagan, whom we are big fans of, who previously did Midnight Mass. He has also done The Haunting of Hill House television adaptation, The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is an adaptation of Turn of the Screw, as well as Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, and a few other horror movies beside that. So this essentially is the story of Ilonka, played by Iman Benson, who is star student valedictorian on her way to Stanford when she is diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it obviously upsets all of those plans, and it's terminal. She finds herself at a hospice for other terminal young children, and very soon after arriving, she realizes that perhaps all is not well at this particular hospice. And we get, as we just said, didn't look on the surface to be Mike Flanagan territory. Very quickly we realized, oh, amongst everything else, this is a haunted house movie. This is very much in Mike Flanagan's wheelhouse.
James, I think every year now we're starting to get this Halloween expectation that we have another Mike Flanagan miniseries coming out. And, I looked forward to this. When I heard The Midnight Club was coming out at Christmas time, at Halloween time, I'm already invested. He's already shown himself to be, in my opinion, almost the thinking man's horror writer-director. He embodies his characters with such emotion. You can hardly get through many of his miniseries, his adaptations, without at least a tear in your eye, some misty eye at some point, because he so goes through. He doesn't go just for the scares. He doesn't just go for the slash. He just doesn't go for the blood. He goes for what makes us human. And there's always these quasi-philosophical discussions, whether it is in The Haunting of Hill House or possibly my favorite so far that he has done. My favorite adaptation is last year's Midnight Mass. I think for me that still kind of holds the pinnacle of what he's produced so far. Others will differ with that, but it was my personal favorite. Having said that, I love The Midnight Club. However, it must be said, and I only learned this about halfway through, that unlike his previous adaptations for Netflix, this is not a complete miniseries. This is season one of what is going to be subsequent seasons. And so it helps going in with the knowledge that not every T is going to be crossed, not every I is going to be dotted at the end of episode 10.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest, I was not familiar with the source material. I don't know, even now, if this is a series of novels or whether it was a standalone novel. But yeah, even 10 episodes in, he leaves us on a kind of cliffhanger. But what I really liked about this is that, on the one hand, yes, it is this kind of spooky haunted house mystery. As with some of the best YA books that I have read, it's a lot about digging into the history of that place and uncovering, its past and the stories there and what lingers. Very quickly, Ilonka discovers that there is once upon a time, this home used to be where a cult set up residence in the basement. There also was a rumor that one woman one young girl walked out cured. And so that gives her a sense of hope. What I really enjoyed about the dynamic of this story compared with some of the other stories is that, going in, all of these kids are going to die. They are, sad to say, they are terminal cases, but they all know they're going to die. And I thought that gave them some real kind of agency as protagonists for this kind of story. They have already, reconciled the fact that this is a one-way journey for them. They're already sort of standing on the precipice of the abyss, looking in and kind of going, okay, well, in a way, what kind of fun what kind of fun can I wring from these last weeks, months, years of my life? And I think it adds a really sort of interesting dynamic to the story when you have these characters who know there's no coming back from it. They're willing to put it all on the line, as it were.
It's interesting, not that there's a tremendous amount of parallels between this and Dead Poet Society, but both stories talk about a new generation of young people who discover a previous generation before them who had started a tradition, and they seek to maintain that tradition. Obviously, in Dead Poet Society, it's about getting around poetry, and this, it's a sitting around a table in a fantastic library, it must be said, and telling ghost stories and tales of the supernatural. So, and the point I was going to make that kind of draws those two together is both stories take a group of young people who are suppressed in many cases. We have the rich folk that are just kind of going through their parents' expectations for them in Dead Poet Society. And in the Midnight Club, we have young people who have been given a terminal diagnosis and the end of their life is coming. And yet both groups learn how to, in the words of John Keating from Dead Poet Society, suck the marrow out of life. Like you see this group of young people, like you said, they have a tremendous amount of agency in this series, and they use it to suck the marrow out of what's left of the life they have to live.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful. I mean, the Midnight Club itself is this kind of this late night storytelling society that they have, which they think is a big secret. That they think they're all sneaking out of the house, out of their rooms at night to meet in the library and drink and and tell these stories in order to scare one another. It should also be pointed out that the 8 of them have a pact. They have an agreement that whoever dies first, if they are able in any way, they must send a sign from the other side.
Right.
This is kind of the agreement they have. So they're all very sort of open-minded and tuned in to the possibility that there is something after death. And that's very much sort of on their minds all the time. But what I liked about sort of this idea of them coming together and telling stories is that it really lends the whole narrative an episodic structure. And the show is kind of built around, each episode is around one character's story. Right. And the stories tend to be kind of autobiographical to some degree, in some, while they cover a raft of genres, from like serial killer stories to magical stories to hard sci-fi and what have you. You see within those stories the struggle of that individual.
Yes.
And the last thing about that I really liked is how Flanagan, when making this, he casts this cast of characters as the characters within each story. So it just gives these actors even more to do, and they get to sort of play around a little bit, have some fun, play some different roles along the way.
That's what made this series for me. This is one of the reasons I enjoyed it so well, is we got to have an anthology series, and I didn't know it was going to be an anthology series. We have these wonderful tales that are told, and some are better than others, but it was almost like these little mini Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Night Gallery episodes that were kind of dispersed in, as you said, and reflect the struggles that the individuals were going through. I think one of them no more so than the gay character, Spencer, who is dealing with the relationship he has with his parents. His mother's hyper-religious, has rejected him because of his homosexuality. And then his story is about a basically he's a cyborg who's being told he's defective, and there's
Mm.
something wrong with him, there's something broken with him, and that he has to reconcile that with his creator, his father, mother. And it was just this beautiful imagery. And so I love how they're able to creatively take these really creative stories and kind of mold them into, as you say, the struggles that the individuals, I was going to say children, they're not children, teenagers are going through.
Sure, yeah, and because they are not children, because they are kind of adolescents, you know, they're allowed to, you know, there's a little bit of sort of romantic interplay between some of the characters. They're allowed to kind of break the rules in some ways that sort of children, quote unquote, wouldn't be allowed to do. And but then also the series never forgets kind of the setting in which it's in. Whereas there is this kind of sort of cloud of impending doom, impending tragedy, of like grounded drama within it all. You know, all of these young people are coming to terms and wrestling with the fact that they are not long for this world.
Right.
But also you have sort of a kind of double layer of mystery about the very location itself. And one of the things I've always really appreciated in Flanagan's work is how much the place and the location, it's a bit of a cliche, but becomes a character in and of itself in the story here. You know, it's being run as a children's hospice by Dr. Stanton, who played by Heather Langenkamp, lest we forget, who of course is the, you know, the heroine from the Nightmare on Elm Street film, certainly from the first couple. Anyways, she's Nancy. And actually, if you've seen Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the Dream Warriors, so she's really the big lead in 1 and 3, and 2, because 2 went and did something else. And in 3, she is brought in as a consultant into a sort of medical facility where teenagers are wrestling with their dreams, because they're all being tormented by the same boogeyman in their dreams. And there are a lot of these group sessions where they sit down and talk about their dreams and tell stories to one another. And it, you know, there are some sequences in this show which are very knowingly reminiscent of those moments in Dream Warriors. So as a horror fan, I really kind of appreciated that kind of legacy, and just generally the characters seem quite well read, quite well versed. You know, a number of the stories are reminiscent, like you're talking about Spencer's story. There's obviously a kind of Terminator element in that, and but also a kind of sort of AI Pinocchio almost element to it. There's a serial killer story that's very Jeffrey Dahmer-esque, in quite disturbing ways. But so you've got so in the present, you've got this this story of sort of a hospice, and that sits on some kind of ley lines, I think you'd call them, or some kind of, you know, there's some kind of spiritual energy to the ground, but that has obviously over the years drawn its fair share of weirdos to the place. And so you've got this underlying secret of the Paragon, you know, a cult that attempted some kind of sacrificial, you know, blood ritual in order to cure people, heal people, cheat death. And at the same, and that's very, very appealing, you know, not just to anybody, but to these young people who are desperate because they have tried everything else.
And I love how Samantha Sloyan has returned to play a different character, and she plays the kind of the hippy dippy chick who's on the outside, who's got this holistic commune going. And as soon as she started just speaking so sweetly to Ilanka's visiting, going from the house out to the commune, and just talking with her, I thought, you know, she's just too good a bad lady. I mean, she was the hyper bad priest in Midnight Mass last year. She was the person you love to hate. And so I thought, no, she can't be good. She's just too good as a bad person, you know. And of course, we come to find out at the end, yes, not all as it seems, and she is indeed a little bit crazy, a little bit psycho, and is willing to take
Yeah.
others down with her, or
And it's kind of
not take. Yeah,
it's kind of reassuring in a way, because like you said, you're like, oh yeah, she's too good at being crazy to waste her as an
yeah,
actress on this kind of
yeah.
sweet-natured little hippie.
The other thing I really like about Flanagan, and I think I probably mentioned it in Midnight Mass, our review last year, which, by the way, happy anniversary. It's about a year ago that we did
It
Midnight Mass, which
is.
was our second video for Deep Dive movie reviews.
Wow, was it that early on? Was it
It
number
was the
2?
second one. Number 2 was Midnight Mass. I think our first one was
No Time to Die. It was
No Time
definitely
to Die,
James
James
Bond. We
Bond.
started with James
Yeah,
Bond. Oh wow. Well,
yeah,
happy
yeah.
birthday.
Happy birthday. But I love how Flanagan is not afraid to deal with issues of faith, and specifically Christianity. I think there's a lot of, whenever this has been attempted in the past with different horror movies, there'll be some Catholic priest or some exorcist type of interaction that's kind of generic. He specifically addresses a lot of the fundamentalism in the evangelical right-wing Christianity that comes in. And then, obviously we have the character of Sandra, who is one of the members of the Midnight Club, who is a devout evangelical Christian and struggles with Spencer's homosexuality, struggles with some of the when they're going to do a ritual together, it's in odds with her Christian beliefs. They're going to do this pagan ritual, and you see though the deconstruction of her faith and reconstruction. She's still, and this is what I like about Flanagan. It's not like, oh no, religion's bad, and once you come to the light, you'll get rid of your religion, and you will come into some new understanding of enlightenment. No, she deconstructs the bad elements that she has been given. That we see with Spencer's parents, has this religious evangelical background. The willingness to reassess those things, put the bad elements out of their life, but continue with their faith in a much more holistic and life-giving way. And I think as a person of faith myself, I kind of appreciate those aspects that Flanagan brings. He brought it in Midnight Mass, and he, to a lesser extent, in Bly Manor and Haunting of Hill House. But I love his approach to religion in his films.
Yeah, no, and I think it goes beyond religion here. It's faith. It's looking for answers here, and because we're dealing with primarily medical conditions, and how to treat medical conditions here. He touches on everything from just praying it away, just praying that you'll be okay, to alternative medicines, holistic approaches, traditional medicine. Of course, everybody has gone through the system and had as much treatment and chemo and whatever as they can, and still yet have not found anything. And so it pushes these characters to see just how far they are willing to go, what they are willing to try, before they just have to accept the fact that we are all mortal, and like you said, it goes so far as to sort of pagan sacrifices, where you're praying to gods you've only heard of 5 minutes ago and read in a book that you found in a dusty basement. You're like, if it works, I'm willing to give it a go, because at the end of the day, people
got nothing else to lose. They got nothing else to lose.
This is it. People just are terrified of the unknown, are terrified of death, of the next step, and that's why these kids make this pact with one another. They're just like, just let us know what it is, and you get into an element of that, and that's why they're so tuned in to the supernatural. They're so open to it. So I thought it was fascinating how he kind of tackles and broaches all of these different potential solutions, and alternative medicine, homeopathic remedies and whatever. And I came away with the impression that, he's not falling down on one side or the other, really. He's kind of sort of saying, well, we all know that all of these are only going to get you so far. They're all ultimately merely delaying the inevitable. Right. So to one degree, I think he's quite willing to sort of say, so in that regard, they're all just as good / useless as each other. So it's entirely up to you how you prepare yourself.
Right.
But probably blood sacrifice is not for everybody.
No, no, probably not. But you're right. I would agree with you. I don't think he falls down on one. He doesn't say, "Oh, religion is bad, science is good."
Not at all.
He holds science up, and then he kind of poo-poos elements of it. He holds up religion, and then he poo-poos elements up. He holds up alternative medicines, and then poo-poos that a bit, and holds up I guess it would be that holistic commune that's outside. But then we realize, oh yeah, she's a nutter too. So there was no there was no final call on what is the correct way forward, other than we're all human, we're all going to die eventually. At one point, Heather Langenkamp says, we're all dying. It's just, when are we going to go? I just want to say, I thought the cast of young people in this film, or in this series, was fantastic. I enjoyed each and every one of them. I didn't find there was a weak link. Although, if I had to say a strength, I think Ruth Codd's Anya was the character I most enjoyed. I don't think it's a coincidence that she was the one who ends up dying about midway through, because I think she was almost like the unofficial leader of the pack. Even though Ilanka is the main protagonist, there was something about Anya that lent itself to, I found her story the most interesting. When she tells her story at the Midnight Club, I thought that was the best story there. And when she went, it had this huge impact on the group because of the gravitas she
the
brought
hole
to
that she leaves.
Yeah, she there was so much gravity around her, and she was such a complicated, nuanced character that I was both sad to see her go, but then realized her going had the biggest impact if you're going to have an emotional experience in this.
Absolutely. I mean, because in some ways she was the biggest personality. She was the one who had chosen sort of anger as her coping mechanism, if you like. She was just sort of bitter and snarky and aggressive and antagonistic all the time. And you obviously knew that this was a shell and a shield, and that really it was just kind of, she was hurting and damaged on the inside. Like she's missing a leg. Yeah, from her illness, has left her sort of wheelchair bound, which obviously only adds to her woes. And Ilanka,
because she dreams of being a dancer,
of a ballet dancer, yeah, which is sort of the great sort of pain, the great sort of tragedy of it all. And you have Ilanka coming in not only into this sort of tight knit group as the newbie, but she's literally filling the empty bed of Anya's previous roommate. Who has just died. And so Anya is even more antagonistic against her, because it shows her just how this process does just go on, and every one of them are unfortunately kind of like replaceable. That bed will be filled, your bed will be filled by somebody the minute you vacate it, and you will vacate it, and it won't be long until you do. And so it really kind of sort of hits it home. Yeah, I thought she was great. And you're right, they all are. I was sort of looking for a weak link among them, but it's so well cast, and I don't think any of them, obviously they're all up and coming performers. There was no like sort of big recognizable face in there to kind of offset the balance. And it also helps, it's a classic horror movie trope. Well, it doesn't help, but it makes it harder for you to predict who's going to go and who's going to die. If there's a big name in there, you're like, well, they'll make it. But I mean, I do
half the fun is being a Mike Flanagan series is finding previous actors he's used, because he loves to work with a certain group of actors. I mean, Henry Thomas hops in as the hitchhiker couple, and it's like, wait, who's that? Oh, that's Henry Thomas, and it becomes almost like an Easter egg of finding actors from past Flanagan projects.
That's right. I mean, of course, Zach Gilford, who was arguably one of the leads of Midnight Mass, is there in a very different role as sort of the gay orderly who looks after them day in and day out, and is quite a sort of surrogate father figure, if you like, older brother to Spence on his particular journey, and shows him a side of his identity that he might not have experienced otherwise. I mean, but I do want to give a big shout out to Iman Benson, though, who plays Ilanka, because we do need an entry point into this world and into this story, and I thought she was fantastic. She was absolutely kind of captivating from
Mhm.
minute one. I thought it was incredible how the use of wigs in the story, because she has this fantastic head of hair, which obviously is then shorn away from her. And we see it grow, and she looks great with like short hair or long hair. But it was interesting how they used it as a kind of character trait as well. You've got the other girl, Cherry, who's just a pathological liar. You know, her
Yeah.
coping mechanism is just to lie about absolutely everything all the time. But some grain of truth involves her mother being involved in the film industry, and so they get wigs made for them,
Mhm.
and they come in, and it gives Iman Benson the opportunity to sort of shift her character, whether she's wearing the wig or not wearing the wig. You see it's sort of a degree of confidence in her character
Right.
as well. But I thought she was phenomenal. I thought she was really, really good. She's done a bit of TV before, like the remake of Uncle Buck, which I never saw. But she is absolutely, as they all are, on my radar now, and I'm sure we will see a lot more of them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, she came across to me as like an old soul. Like she
Mm,
looks like a teenager, but an older person in there as well. She was able to communicate some depth and layers that a lot of times a teenager or a young person, I think she's in her early 20s in real life,
yeah. Well, I think
is
that's what you need for your central character, because you do want to draw in an audience of varying generations even. And you know that Mike Flanagan, because of his previous work, has an older fan base, for
Mhm.
want of a better word. You know, we wouldn't have come to this show necessarily if his name wasn't attached to it.
No, just hearing YA initially makes me,
Mm,
but
yeah, maybe.
being it's Mike Flanagan, okay, absolutely sign me up. But like you said, there needs to be that element there has to be an element of depth. I'm
Mm.
not here to watch Divergence or The Hunger Games.
No, I mean, but
I
that said, what I was going to say, I mean, this is absolutely a Mike Flanagan project, but I think
Mhm.
it does stay true to its YA roots. I
No,
think,
absolutely, yeah.
teenagers and young audiences watching this will really respond to it.
Mhm.
One thing that I really liked about it is that these characters are all exactly the same age as me, because
Right.
it's all set in like 1994, 95.
Mhm.
And they're all like 17, 18 years old, which is exactly the age I was in I was 18 in 1995. I finished high school in 1995. And so the soundtrack was very period specific, and it was spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of those songs. I was like, I wonder if Flanagan's probably about the same age, but and I think the book did come out about 94 or 95.
Well, it's interesting you say that because when I have picked up on the vibe of a director who's my age or a filmmaker, I can feel the
Mm.
the DNA speaking to my DNA from a particular time period. So I resonate with that. I know
Oh,
exactly what
sure.
you're talking about.
There's just an authenticity to
Yeah.
the characters and the fashion and the dialogue and which bands they like and which they don't, that you're just like,
Hmm.
yeah, exactly
Right.
those. And so that
Right.
was just another little sort of Easter egg for me. I was just like, yes, these are my people, kind of thing.
If I have a critique though, I almost wish this had just stayed as a miniseries with a book-ended beginning and an
Mm,
end, because I thought at times the central storyline was a little nebulous. I kept wondering why these ghost-like characters are coming out because they're never really explained or talked about or given really the legitimacy that maybe a prior Flanagan um, miniseries would have unveiled at a certain point. It's only in episode 10 we actually start to get a little bit of a hint of some of these characters or these ghosts and specters we have seen kind of jumping out suddenly for the last 10 episodes, apparently for no reason whatsoever until the end. And then it's like, okay, now I see this is series 2 is going to kind of
mm,
unpackage this a bit more. And so I felt that central plot often was a little too nebulous for me, but what helped it fill in the blanks was the anthology series. It's like whenever we got a little off track with the main plot, let's tell a really good story. And
sure.
so yeah, how do you feel about that? Because I would really wish this had just come to a proper closure.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Because I mean, I feel that you can go both ways with the anthology element of it, because on the one hand, you notice that like Ilonka, even before she comes to the hospice, she's having visions of like these ghosts and things, right from the very opening moments. So it's obviously something that she's tuned in with personally, as opposed to it's the
The
place.
house. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it quite goes into enough of an explanation for that, but clearly I guess they need to hold back some kind of explanation. And at times I was almost thinking the other way, that some of these anthology stories were kind of just slowing everything down a little bit, and I wanted just to get to the main contemporary story a little bit. It felt like, you know, their investigations or whatever were just being put on hold so that so-and-so could tell another story. In and of themselves, they're generally pretty good, and I'd hate to be the one to cut any of those stories. But what was interesting, as I want to make it clear, and I'd like to hear from anybody who has read the book, because I haven't read it, but in reading about the book, I think there are fewer characters at the hospice. And so therefore, I think there's 5 of them as opposed to 8 of them in the TV show, which would obviously mean fewer stories, I would imagine. I imagine that most of the rest of the contemporary story about the place and the cult and all the rest of it is the same. But I think if I read it right, that there were 5 as opposed to 8, and that would kind of make sense. And I'm curious as to how different the individual characters are, which are the new characters, which are the added ones, how they change the dynamic with you. But I would probably need to read the book. So if anybody has read the book, please let us know in terms of the group dynamic, you know, who's new, or am I just reading it wrong, where they're 8 all along, and
No, that's
any other
interesting.
differences would be
because there was only 5. This arguably, though, this is one of the most represented groups I've seen. There's 8.
It's incredibly diverse. It's incredibly
diverse. It's funny how that happens, but yeah, it's but
my suspicion is that the characters in the book were less diverse.
My guess, you know, it's obviously reflective of the times we're in. I was thinking about it when I was watching it. If you watch a police show from the early 80s, you will see a team of 5 people, 4 white guys and 1 white girl. It was almost the stock and trade. You know, if the show has 4 white guys and 1 white girl, it was made sometime between 1978 and 1985. It was part and parcel for a certain time. And I have a feeling
after that, you'd get like one of the guys would be black.
Exactly. and then you start to see a little bit more of that. And I'm starting to suspect film historians 75 years from now will look at something like the Midnight Club and go, "Oh yeah, that's early 2020s. That was the
casting right there.
Representation was becoming a needed thing, and rightfully so. I'm not suggesting it's not, but it is a product of the times, and so it'd be interesting to see what future historians will say about that kind of casting.
Absolutely. When you have 8 characters and they represent sort of at least 8 different sort of demographics and minorities and underrepresented groups and what have you, it's like the United Colors of Benetton or something like that. And it's I mean, exactly what you said. It's a product of the current climate and the times. I'm not criticizing it. There's nothing wrong with it. You have to admit it's ever so slightly unrealistic that's how the group would be in real life. You know, these types, if we're going to get into it, these types of institutions would tend to skew one way or the other and try and target a particular customer base, for want of a better phrase, and attract you know, a certain type of group or person or whatever. But yeah, I mean, this is to use your phrase, a nebulous point. It's just what it's like to make a TV show in 2022.
Well, James, we reached the point in our review where we come down and we give it a instrument. What instrument of measurement are we going to use for the Midnight Club? Hourglasses.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a nice motif, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. How many hourglass tattoos?
Yeah. How many hourglass tattoos are we going to give the Midnight Club?
Okay. I mean, I thought this was, you know, it was great, hugely entertaining, rock solid cast, you know, plumbed depths in areas I wasn't expecting to, as well as striking the a hard fought balance between being a Mike Flanagan series and being a sort of a YA sort of haunted house adaptation with that wrestles with some some real life topics. I thought it was all done really, really well. As we've mentioned, I think it's a little unfocused, a little baggy in places, as is the nature of these things. But for the most part, I mean, but there's nothing specific that I'd highlight and go, get rid of that. Yeah. Or get rid of that person, get rid of that character. So rock solid 4 hourglass tattoos out of 5 for me.
James, we're on the same page. I'm giving it 4 as well. It's solid. It's Mike Flanagan. It's what we've come to expect from him. He really knows how to deliver I almost hesitate to say this was horror. This is probably the least horror-esque of what he's delivered thus far, at least as far as the Netflix series goes. But he knows how to tell a human story in a very creative way, using some wonderful characters that are very memorable. They're not forgettable. There's so many, we watch so many movies, so many TV shows, and sometimes 6 months later, I can't remember what that character was or why they did what they did. But Mike Flanagan has a way of creating characters that are memorable. And I look forward to season 2 of The Midnight Club. And I'm going to give it a solid 4 as well.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to see where it goes. It does leave you on a sort of a revelatory cliffhanger that certainly stokes the fires of the greater mystery at play. I can't wait.
Absolutely. And we know that Samantha Sloyan is still at large. She made her getaway in the lift, and
she sure is.
Anyhow, that's what our thoughts and our review are of The Midnight Club. What are yours? Have you watched previous Mike Flanagan Netflix series? How does The Midnight Club compare to maybe past projects? Let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, as well as, James and I are on social media, so you can find links to our Instagram and Twitter accounts in the links below. James?
Absolutely. As I said, if you've read the book or books, I'm not even sure if there are more books. Is it a faithful adaptation? What's it changed? Do you like the changes? What would you rather they had not changed or had changed? Where does it go from here? No spoilers, please, for season 2, if you know. But a few little breadcrumbs might be nice.
Absolutely. Until next episode. Bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures all